Cruising in the LS Swap Dodge. It's a beautiful day. Back road. You just can't beat electronic fuel injection, overdrive transmissions. Good afternoon, Sean here from Mountains Garage. And judging by my intro, I love EFI and overdrive transmissions. Who wouldn't? EFI is normally always perfect. Gets excellent mileage. A lot easier on the engine. It's not always washing the cylinders down with gas. Combined with an overdrive, if you haven't noticed, the vehicles last a lot longer than they used to. And they're probably made with cheaper parts, but they're lasting longer than they used to with carburetors and no overdrive. But carburetors have a place. They still make a lot of power. A lot of people still use them, racing and such. A lot of people have forgotten how much fun they are and challenging. I find them interesting. And to really understand why, let's go back in time when Sean was a kid. Back when my primary mode of transportation had two wheels and pedals that I incidentally had to build out of a pile of parts that was upstairs in my parents' garage, I was free about the neighborhood and too young to really grasp what my brother was doing in the driveway. He was always working on an old hot rod. He had a 55 Chevy that he put a punched out 283 in. And on that car, I believe he had a brand new Holley carburetor, because left behind after he moved out, and when I was smart enough to know what I was looking at, was the instruction sheet for a dual feed Holley, double pumper. And I read that thing like a Bible, over and over again, how to adjust it. And I just really couldn't wait to get my own. So I finally get my own car, which has an 850 spreadboard. But before that, my dad, being really patient, let me hop up his Gremlin X for the 304, and I converted that from a two-barrel to an Offenhauser aluminum intake and a 600 Holley 4160 carburetor. We'll get into the differences here someday. But then I finally get my first car, 70 Chevelle SS396. It's got 488 gears, a Moroso brute strength, ladder bars, a roll cage, 402 with a big cam, Edelbrock torquer intake with the carburetors rotated clockwise to change the intake runners, an 850 spreadboard. Now, a spreadboard carburetor has smaller primaries and huge secondaries, and it's really an excellent idea, which, like the Quadrajet, they had a long run, but Holley didn't stick with that for very long, and I'm sure there's reasons why. I think you can still buy them or find them, but that 850 spreadboard was pretty impressive. But I had never still had, at this point, really got into taking them apart and modifying them. That came later on. So only after a year, I sold my first 70 Chevelle SS396 to my best friend and next door neighbor. And I bought, on a used car lot, a 70 SS454 Chevelle with no motor or transmission in it. And originally I had just a 350 small block and a 4-speed just to get it running. And then I came across that had a 780 Holley. We're supposed to be talking about carburetors here, but that I scrounged up somewhere. And then I came up with a 454 out of a 70 Monte Carlo that was rebuilt down at the college, which was like a mile from my house. And, it was cheap, and it actually ran really well. I lost it in a fire eventually, not in the vehicle, building. But that initially had probably the same 780 on it, Holley. And then I bought my first tunnel ram and a pair of 600 Holleys. And that's when things started getting interesting, because I was getting pretty good at tuning them, and now you had two to do, and it's amazingly easy to make them responsive. There's not that many adjustments. And between me and my buddy Jim, who, if he's watching this video, will remember fondly, I worked out at my parents' garage, which was a relatively big single garage with a small lean-to on the back, and that was where all the action took place. It's where my, engine assembly and storage and whatnot. And we had a cabinet, and Jim would patiently come over. He had a bunch of Holley pots. I had acquired a whole bunch of Holley pots, and we organized every last nut, bolt, and gasket for a Holley, and we had spare bowls and different types and learned how to modify all this stuff. And it was, for a couple of 16, 17-year-olds, it was pretty good. And we got really good at playing with carburetors. Tragically, when I moved to where I am now, I had put all that stuff in a big plastic trash can, and it just sat there and in a weak moment one day, which I've always regretted throwing anything away. If you look around, you can see it's a problem still, but I miss that bucket full of Holley carburetor pots very often. For his benefit, I need to sidebar a little bit and go back to how Jim and I became friends. I had a fast car, and the hangout was my parents' house. I mean, after dark, there'd be God knows how many vehicles. My parents were so patient, because everybody's vehicle was hopped up, and there was lots of rubber marks in the road, and they only complained every so often, but not very often. So anyway, I always had lots of people want to ride with me, and there was a kid that lived one street up named Bruce, and he and I he's my wingman. We used to go cruising at night all the time. And I didn't know Jim that well. I knew he had a white Mustang 2 with a 302 in it, because that's how you know people, by what they got for vehicles. I really didn't know him that well. And Bruce and I just got back from cruising. It's probably midnight. We're just sitting there talking in my driveway. And Jim pulls up out front when he's got his buddy with him, his sidekick, because we didn't have a lot of game with girls, so you might as well go cruising and have fun with your buddies. So, and he's trying to do a burnout, but the thing's only got like 13-inch tires, and it's automatic, and it'll hardly turn the tire, so it's just barely rotating and making this horrible screeching sound. So Bruce, not me, Jim, if you're watching, picked up an apple and threw it, and I think it went into the car and hit Jim. And to this day, he says I threw the apple, but I didn't. But after that, we became fast friends, and still to this day. He's a great guy, and a lot of good times. So every vehicle I had, pretty much since I was, 16, has had a big block and a Holley carburetor. I never got into the Carters at the time, and Eldebrock bought the rights to Carters. And to this day, I've rebuilt a bunch for boats, the Carter Eldebrock style. I have a dual quad low-rise small block Chevy intake that I actually bought 2 500s for. I haven't assembled that engine yet, but it's on the list for this winter that we'll go over. And they're okay. I'm really good with quadrojets. I can make those rip pretty good, but you don't see a lot of the, you don't see them in pairs very often. I have a pile of them, and I might actually try that, because why not? But Holleys, of all the miles I put on, and I ran a Holley up until, I don't know. Well, I know this is 9/11, 2020, on 9/11, 2001, I was driving my 3/4 ton Chevy with a 600 Holley on it. I drove that for a while after that, so well into the 2000s, I was still wheeling a carburetor. And only one time, if I had a breakdown on the side of the road, and I fixed it with a screwdriver, the float stuck. This is way back when I put the small block in my Chevelle. And I didn't have a fuel filter on it. Right? We ran from the tank through the mechanical fuel pump and right to the carburetor, because I clearly was not smart when I put it together. So I stuck a fuel filter in it and never had a problem again. All I did is bang on it with a screwdriver. So I had a date at the time. She wasn't impressed. And it wasn't Jim. I have lots of cabs to overhaul, and I bought a pile of kits. Then I picked up these the other night. These are a pair of 450s. Really nice. I almost bought a new pair. I'll show you the intake they're going on, but this was a wicked deal. And it came with some actual Russell and Fragola fittings and some linkage, a cable. A good deal. These are 4160 style, which means there's no rear metering block. And typically a 4160 does not have dual feed bowls, but they came either way. They're not, the style of carburetor is a 4160 like this, or a 4150, which has a rear metering block. And sometimes a rear accelerator pump, sometimes 4-corner idle. This has idle screws, both ends. I'm actually looking for another one of these. This is a 4779-9 750 Holley double pumper. Factory without a choke. The hole was never bored out right there. I mean, they still had the horn and all that stuff, but typically that would be where the rod comes through for the choke, and this never had it punched out. So if I could find another one of those, I just got this one a deal the other day. I'll find one. I haven't started shopping very much, but you can always find the part number right on the horn, if the horn's still there. 4779-9. But the 4779, this, all of these carburetors start at a 600 and goes all the way up to 850, and they just keep adding, 77, 78, 79, 80, like that. So that's how you tell them apart. I'm not going to get too technical in this video because when I actually overhaul them, I will. I'll show you that intake right now. I've shown you on my Model A, I have the natural version of this intake that I paid full retail price 10 years ago of almost $400, and I have a brand new pair of 450s on it. Inline, I'm not a big fan of inline, but on this low rise it works pretty good. And I've tried the sideways mount and all the linkage hits on the intake, and you could do sideways on a low rise, but it's really not worth the effort. So this was in the scratch and dent sale that they had online. There is not a scratch or a dent in this intake, and I paid $170 for it, brand new, in the box with shipping. So that's pretty cool. And I already knew that I need spacers and stuff to make the linkage clear, stud, so I just pick up stuff as I go. This intake really doesn't have a destination. I mean, people laugh when you put a carburetor on an LS, but I still like them, and that's all I can say. I go back and forth in my head all the time on this Nova here. It's going to be, it's going to have a roll cage and a semi-narrowed rear end, and it's always been my plan to have a turbo LS and a turbo 400. That's why I keep building turbo 400s for it and selling them off. And I've had the Borg 1 a turbo there for too many years, 5 or 6 already. I got everything to do it. Just time, I guess, when I finally get this Monte Carlo project done. I can't wait to move on. I hope that happens soon. I'll show you that too. And then in my next thought, I got a roller cam 421 small block I'm building with a tunnel ram and lots of 4-speeds, and that sounds like a lot of fun too. So I think I'm going to do both and just be able to swap them out, I guess. I don't know. This is why I need projects, because I noodle stuff in my head and I'm never bored. I'm always thinking about it in the background, collecting parts. Without that in my life, and I do this for multiple projects at once at this point, because, just because you're not going to live forever, might as well do what you can. That's what gets me by. That's my happiness. People are always asking, when's it going to be done? When's it going to be done? Well, if it was actually done, I need to start another project. So I used to knock out projects at a more rapid rate. Now it's a whole journey, as they say. So fortunately, the journey on the Monte is every day getting a little bit closer. I've got the intercooler plumbed. I'm back out pointing toward the throttle body. I've ordered a couple 45-degree boots to make that easier, because I'm trying to fit the fan shroud in and everything else, maybe even a fan. Piece by piece, I got to crawl into the dash and hook up. I use a Silverado throttle cable in just about everything. Works nice. Sometimes you got to put a cable ferrule inside near the pedal arm, but it's pretty well universal, and when you're stripping the vehicle, you just pop it out and saving money. Nothing to do with what we've been talking about for 15 minutes, but as you can imagine, parts show up here on a regular basis. In fact, any day the FedEx, UPS, or mail lady doesn't show up, I get sad, because it's like Christmas every day. So here's another 4L80E drum I bought. And I mentioned I bought some 1/16 drill bits one night late on eBay. About 2 packages. I wanted to be proactive. Then these things will not even scratch metal, so don't buy them. Made in China, total junk. So for the same price, a little more shopping, it had American flags, 100% lifetime warranty. Read the fine print. If you break one, they're going to replace it. Because I break a lot. Drilling that bleed hole right there. So I stuck one in the old Milwaukee. I smoked right through it and didn't break it. And, just to be, again, proactive, I bought 20 of them, so that should keep me going for a while. And it makes me happy. And I just called, I didn't call, I sent them a message through eBay saying that these were not performing as I expected. I was polite and whatnot, and the guy just sent me my money back. And I'd be excited, but I'm still going to throw them away because they might drill a hole in wood, but what are you going to do with a 1/16 hole in wood? I don't know. You know me, I'll save them, but whatever. On the intro to this video, I also mentioned overdrive transmissions. When you have gearing meant for acceleration, anything pretty much 390, 410, and down, higher numerically is lower gears. You really need, if you're going to cruise with a 28 to 30 inch tire, you need overdrive, and it really makes an old car fun to drive. I mean, you can cruise with traffic, you feel like you're driving a modern car, which is awesome. But when you have, for instance, a turbo LS, you need to snub that thing up some. They depending on how much power you're making, 320 to 370 gear will do it for you, and you can still run a 3-speed transmission, turbo 400, for instance, and it's pretty damn drivable and fast. Plus, you're going to go big mile an hour because with your lower gears, it's a detriment to going really fast mile an hour wise. And if you're going to power, it can still be quick. That's a whole nother video. Gearing. We could go over gearing all night long. But I've just rambled this entire video anyway, and talked about everything from throwing apples to dating and having the float stick. Well, I don't even know what I'm going to call this video. Enjoy. I love this time of year. Take it easy.